Throughout your life, you have learned many things about people. You have been told who you should trust, how to be a good person, and how you should treat others. But very few people have explained how human nature really works. Because some truths are uncomfortable, and some truths destroy the beautiful stories people tell themselves about who they are. Most of us want to believe that people are rational, fair, and well-intentioned. It feels more comforting to think that the world is largely built on honesty, hard work, and integrity. But real life often works differently. Hidden beneath the surface of human nature are darker tendencies that we do not like to admit, yet encounter every single day. These tendencies do not exist only in other people. They exist within all of us. Perhaps at some point in your life you gave someone the best of yourself only to receive far less appreciation than you expected. Maybe you believed that honesty would always be rewarded, yet watched more cunning people move ahead faster. Maybe you thought people judged you based on your character, only to realize over time that many of them evaluated you based on your status, power, or usefulness. This is where the difference between the idealized version of human nature and its real version begins to reveal itself. Understanding human nature is not about becoming cynical. On the contrary, it is about seeing reality for what it is. People who see the world as it truly is tend to experience fewer disappointments. They do not burden others with impossible expectations. They recognize more quickly who is a genuine friend and who is simply an opportunist. Most importantly, instead of taking people's behavior personally, they begin to understand the nature behind it. In this video, we are going to explore some truths about human nature that most people would rather not admit. These truths may sound harsh. Some of them may even make you uncomfortable. But if you look back on different stages of your life, you will notice their presence almost everywhere. In business, in friendships, in family relationships, on social media, and even within your own behavior. Because perhaps the most fascinating thing about human nature is this. People often say they want to hear the truth, but they do not actually want the truth to be revealed. And that is exactly why the things we are about to discuss are realities that most people spend their lives trying to avoid confronting. The first brutal truth about human nature is this. People rarely judge you by what you say. More often, they judge you by how you make them feel. Logical explanations, reasonable arguments, and good intentions are not as powerful as you think. A person's opinion of you is often shaped not by facts, but by the emotional experience they have when they are around you. This is why some people dislike you even when you have done nothing wrong, while others remain loyal to people who have clearly made mistakes. The human mind makes decisions through emotion first and then uses logic afterward to justify those decisions. Another uncomfortable reality is that most people claim to value justice, but their idea of fairness can change quickly when their own interests are involved. People usually love their principles until those principles are tested. They may criticize a behavior in someone else, only to find excuses for the same behavior when they themselves are responsible for it. The human mind is remarkably skilled at justifying its own mistakes. That is why so many people speak passionately about honesty. Yet a significant number of those same people step back when honesty becomes truly costly. Another disturbing truth is that people do not react to success as innocently as we often assume. Success inspires people, but it also triggers comparison. When someone appears more successful, happier, or more confident than others, it may give hope to some while creating silent discomfort in others. Your very presence can make people aware of the areas where they feel they are falling short. For this reason, negative reactions toward you are not always caused by something you did wrong. Sometimes they are caused by what you represent. Another difficult aspect of human nature to accept is that people often respond to the value they perceive. A person's interest in you, respect for you, or attitude toward you may sometimes have more to do with your position than with your character. The fact that powerful people are surrounded by others is not always because they are loved. Human beings are naturally drawn to power, status, and opportunity. This is not necessarily because people are bad. It exists because it is an extension of the survival mechanisms built into human nature. But those who fail to understand this may mistake attention for genuine sincerity. Perhaps one of the harshest truths is this: people do not miss you when they lose you. They miss you when they cannot replace you. Because what is often missed is not the person, but the value that person brought into their lives. When a friend, a partner, or a colleague leaves our lives, the emptiness we feel is not always caused by the absence of that individual alone. Sometimes it comes from the loss of familiarity, comfort, or the benefits they provided. That is why some people try to come back after losing you. Not because they have changed, but because the void was not as easy to fill as they expected. People often claim that they want the truth, but much of the truth threatens the stories people have built about themselves. As a result, most people do not search for truth itself. They search for information that confirms what they already believe. It is easy to accept ideas that align with our existing views. What is difficult is accepting the possibility that we may be wrong. This is why many people think they are pursuing truth when, in reality, they are simply pursuing ideas that make them feel comfortable. Perhaps one of the most important truths about human nature is that it is impossible to be liked by everyone. No matter how kind, honest, or well-intentioned you are, there will always be people who dislike you. Because what people see when they look at you is not always you. Sometimes they see their own fears. Sometimes they see their insecurities. Sometimes they see the person they wish they could become but never managed to be. And more often than not, their reaction is directed not at you, but at something within themselves. Understanding human nature does not mean losing faith in people. On the contrary, it means seeing people for who they truly are. Real maturity is not believing that people are perfect. It is being able to develop realistic expectations even after recognizing their flaws. Life does not necessarily become easier, but it does become more understandable. And sometimes the greatest power a person can possess is not seeing the world as it should be, but seeing it as it really is. Another overlooked aspect of human nature is that people often say they want change, yet become uncomfortable when someone actually changes. When a person spends years staying quiet, making sacrifices, or trying to please everyone, the people around them become accustomed to it. But the moment that person begins setting boundaries, prioritizing their own interests, or simply stops saying yes to everything, those same people may accuse them of changing. In reality, what has changed is often not their character. What has changed is that they have stopped neglecting themselves. People may say they support your growth, but when that growth disrupts the version of you they have grown comfortable with, their reaction can be very different. Another truth is that the gap between what people say and what they do is often much larger than we realize. People frequently describe their values with words, but their actions reveal what they truly value. Everyone praises loyalty, but what matters is who remains by your side during difficult times. Everyone claims to value honesty, but what matters is how many continue to practice it when it comes at a cost. This is why one of the fastest ways to understand people is not by listening to their words, but by observing their repeated actions. Because actions reveal who people are far more clearly than their promises ever can. Another realization many people come to later in life is that people are often just as interested in labeling you as they are in understanding you. Understanding requires time and effort. Labeling is much easier. People may observe a few of your behaviors and quickly decide that you are arrogant, quiet, cold, weak, or distant. Most of the time, they never stop to question whether those labels reflect reality. The human mind prefers placing complex individuals into simple categories rather than taking the time to truly understand them. That is why the opinions people form about you do not always reflect who you really are. Perhaps one of the most surprising truths is that although people often claim they want freedom, they frequently choose security instead. They dream about a new life, yet struggle to let go of old habits. They desire major changes, yet fear the uncertainty that change inevitably brings. As a result, many people spend years living in situations that make them unhappy. A familiar discomfort often feels safer than an unknown possibility. This aspect of human nature helps explain why so many people live far below their true potential. And finally, perhaps the harshest truth of all is this: time reveals everyone's true intentions. People can play a role for a while. They can appear different from who they really are for a period of time. They can seem generous, loyal, or caring. But as time passes, the mask becomes heavier. It is difficult for anyone to carry a false identity forever. This is why, in the long run, the best way to understand who someone truly is not by listening to what they say, but by watching what they repeatedly do over time. Time is the greatest test of human character. At first glance, all of these truths may seem pessimistic, but the reality is quite the opposite. Accepting human nature as it is allows you to approach people more consciously. You begin to see more clearly who deserves your trust, who should be kept at a distance, and most importantly, which expectations are setting you up for disappointment. Because the greatest disappointments in life often do not come from people being bad. They come from believing people are something other than what they truly are. Understanding human nature does not teach you to hate people. It teaches you to stop romanticizing them. And perhaps true wisdom begins at exactly that point, the moment you are able to see people not as perfect beings, but as they truly are, flaws and all. Because you may never be able to change the world. You may never be able to change human nature, but once you understand it, you stop being constantly surprised by it.